پارلمان اروپا، کنفرانس مقابله با مداخلات خارجی، پیگیری نفوذ رژیم ایران در اروپا. ارائه گزارش گروه دوستان ایران آزاد در پارلمان اروپا درباره شبکه کارشناسان رژیم برای شیطانسازی علیه مقاومت ایران.
سخنرانی‌های پائولو کازاکا، نماینده پیشین پارلمان اروپا از پرتغال، و فرزین هاشمی به نمایندگی از شورای ملی مقاومت.
I did not have yet the opportunity of reading this report that I am sure that will be very, very instructive. I intended exactly to start my question by, isn't it the tip of the iceberg? And so I'm just repeating what you just said, since what I see here is that this particular group has been very easily exposed, and some of them, they still continue. There is this lady that continues in the same position with secret credentials, doing the same thing in the Department of Defense in Washington. So the issue is, well, don't you really think it's really fantastic that the European Parliament, where I've been as well, 10 years, that for so many years, so many thousands of people working, so many contracts. I mean, they'd never had the opportunity of inviting real experts on Iran. Just allow me to say here that most of what I know, I learned from my biggest teacher, Hossein Madani, in Ashraf, in Iraq, when I was, having, nights up to 6 in the morning discussing issues, and I learned so much. I mean, I never saw someone so bright. But the issue is, how comes that the real expert never made it in this institution? So we could continue on these experts that this house is full of. Isn't really so bizarre, and shouldn't we really go deeper in the iceberg? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Arzalikhos. It is my privilege to have the opportunity to speak on this panel. And I think this is a very timely conference discussing this issue. The document published by Friends of Free Iran is an excellent collection of facts demonstrating how the Mullah's regime have been manipulating policy decision in Europe. I would like to briefly address this issue from a different angle, and then I will refer to a few specific cases of how this has been conducted here in this European Parliament. The disinformation campaign of the Mullah's regime for the Mullah's regime is not a subsidiary issue, but a central part of their strategy of survival. Therefore, it is vital to see this disinformation in its true context. Despite the most brutal suppression in Iran, including 120,000 of political executions, the massacre of 30,000 political prisoners in 1988, the Mullah's regime has failed to eliminate or destroy the Iranian people's desire for democracy, and in particular, it has failed to eliminate or destroy the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran inside the country as the principal movement against the regime. So since beginning of 1990s, the Iranian regime, in addition to its physical suppression, set up a massive department within the MIS calling the Disinformation Department, which they have been engaged in disseminating information against the Iranian opposition both inside and outside the country. Within Iran, they have set up a number of fake so-called NGO, non-governmental organization. One of them called, for example, Nejat Association, which has branches in every single province and many other cities around the country, and are only focused precisely on the People's Mujahideen Organization, PMOI or MEK, and the NCRI. Their policy outside Iran, the regime has recruited journalists, academics, or sent its agents from inside Iran to act as being critical of the regime, but at the same time focus their attention on trying to discredit the Iranian opposition, specifically the National Council of Resistance of Iran and the PMOI. Ali Fallahian, the former minister of MIS, Minister of Intelligence and Security, once in a public interview said, "We do not send our agents to Germany or other countries in Europe or Canada with a label saying that we are agents of the MIS. We send them as journalists, we send them as businessmen or human rights activists." So that's how they have been operating this operation. The theory behind these tactics by the Iranian regime is very simple. They cannot defend their own records on any issue, be it human rights, nuclear weapons program, their terrorism, or their meddling in the internal affairs of other countries in the Middle East. Therefore, they have come to the conclusion that their only option is to demonize the alternative, the democratic alternative to this regime, to claim that there is no viable alternative for the regime. Therefore, real politics will dictate to governments, whether in Europe or in the United States, to accommodate this regime by making concession and pursue a policy of appeasement. The regime, therefore, the regime's agents appearing as independent experts, human rights activists, or even critics of the regime will take the task of spreading the narrative of the Iranian regime on different issues and at the same time focusing on the opposition. So at this point, I'd like to be more specifically and briefly explain how these experts have been playing this game. On one hand, their mission is to spread the narrative of the Iranian regime, as I said, on various issues, and also to promote this false notion of existence of a so-called moderate faction within the mullah's regime in order to justify the policy of appeasement. In this respect, they have taken advantage of the Western government's conciliatory policy on Iran to pursue their objective and at the same time strengthen the policy of appeasement.